Imagine standing in a room dripping with wealth, your heart pounding as your own father holds a lit match to your future. Captain Eleanor, Nora, Caldwell, a 38-year-old U.S. Coast Guard officer, stood rigid in her crisp white uniform, her spine a pillar of discipline, as her father, Victor Grayson, CEO of Triton Defense, snatched her $40 million inheritance check from the table. The Manhattan law office, perched high above the city's glittering skyline, reeked of old money, polished oak, leather, and the faint tang of ambition. Outside, the Hudson River shimmered, oblivious to the storm brewing within. Victor's eyes, cold as steel, locked on Nora's. "This uniform," he sneered, flicking his gold lighter. "A costume for a dreamer who abandoned her family." The flame kissed the check, curling its edges into black ash that fluttered like dead leaves onto the table. That was no mere check, it was her grandfather's trust, his belief in her honor, reduced to cinders. The room held its breath. Nora's sister, Lila, sat across the table, her lips curling into a faint, venomous smirk. No words, just silence sharper than a blade. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a declaration of war. And Nora? She felt the weight of a second envelope, tucked inside her jacket, a secret her grandfather left her. She didn't flinch. She didn't break. But inside, a fire roared to life. If this hits you, if you've ever felt your worth burned to ash by someone you trusted, hit that like button, drop "betrayed" in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe now, Nora's fight is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The air in the law office was thick, charged like the moment before a lightning strike. Victor didn't look at Nora again, his fingers swiping across his tablet as if she were a smudge to be erased. Lila's gaze, sharp and calculating, sized her up not as a sister but as a rival who'd chosen the wrong battlefield. The attorney, Evelyn Harper, cleared her throat, her voice a steady drone as she read the will of Admiral Cornelius Corey Caldwell. The Hamptons estate went to Lila. Victor got Corey's rare maritime charts. Predictable, tidy gifts. Nora's shoulders eased, she'd be out soon. Then Evelyn's tone shifted, a subtle hitch that cracked the room's silence. "To my granddaughter, Captain Eleanor Caldwell," she read, "my true confidant and fellow guardian of honor, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all financial holdings, properties, and controlling shares of Triton Defense." The words landed like a grenade. Victor's tablet clattered to the floor. Lila's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of raw panic. The check, $42,46,000, slid across the table, a blue beacon of trust. But Victor's rage was faster. He lunged, snatching it, his face a mask of fury. "A reward for playing hero?" he roared, the lighter flaring again. The check burned, its ashes a silent scream of Nora's erased legacy. Nora stood frozen, her training holding her together like steel cables. Her heart pounded, not for the money, but for the public shredding of her life's purpose, her service, her honor. Victor's words cut deeper than the fire, "You're nothing in the real world." Yet the second envelope, heavy against her chest, whispered of her grandfather's faith. She'd grown up in his shadow, not Victor's, learning duty on his weathered Brooklyn porch, watching Coast Guard cutters glide through the harbor. He'd taught her to navigate by stars, not stock prices. Now, his final gift was a mission, to fight, not for wealth, but for truth. As the ashes settled, Nora's resolve hardened. Victor thought he'd won, but he'd only lit the fuse. She remembered a night years ago, when her childhood bedroom in the Graysons' Upper East Side penthouse was gutted, her books, photos, even her Coast Guard Academy acceptance letter, replaced by sterile decor. Lila had shrugged then, too, sipping wine, dismissing Nora's shock. "It's just space, Nora. You're never here." That memory, twinned with the burning check, wasn't defeat, it was kindling. Nora wasn't just fighting for her inheritance. She was fighting for her name, her existence. And she'd fight like a Caldwell. The ashes of Nora Caldwell's inheritance still lingered in her mind, a bitter reminder of her father's betrayal, but nothing could have prepared her for the next blow. Captain Eleanor, Nora, Caldwell, a Coast Guard officer forged in discipline, walked into a Brooklyn coffee shop, expecting a quick latte to fuel her day. She handed her debit card to the barista, a young woman with a kind smile. The machine beeped. Declined. Nora's brow furrowed. Her Navy Federal account was solid, every penny earned through years of grueling JAG work. Try again, she said, her voice tight. Another beep. Another apology. The barista's pitying look was a knife to the gut. Nora stepped into the biting February air, the New York skyline looming like a jury, and dialed her credit union. After an eternity of hold music, a clinical voice delivered the impossible. Captain Caldwell, our records show this account was closed 2 weeks ago due to notification of the account holder's passing. Passing? Nora's blood ran cold. I'm standing right here, she said, her voice a low growl. I'm not dead. The silence on the line was heavy, indifferent. We received official documentation, ma'am. You'll need to file a correction with the state. Documentation? This was no mistake. This was Victor Grayson's doing. Her father, the man who'd burned her $40 million legacy, had now erased her very existence. Nora's jeep rattled through Brooklyn's icy streets to the DMV in Flatbush, a gray fortress of bureaucracy where hope went to die. The line snaked endlessly, the air thick with frustration. At the counter, a weary clerk typed Nora's details into a flickering computer, her face shifting from boredom to unease. Ma'am, she said, voice low, your file's flagged. According to the State and Social Security Administration, you're deceased. Nora's heart slammed against her ribs. Legally dead. Her accounts frozen, her identity stolen, not by a stranger, but by her own family. Victor and her sister Lila had orchestrated a bloodless execution, a corporate maneuver to bury her claim to Triton Defense. The clerk's eyes softened. You'll need to go to the county clerk's office. It could take months. Months. Nora walked out, the city's pulse mocking her own. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with a rage so deep it felt like a living thing. She was a ghost, stripped of her name, her money, her place in the world. But ghosts could haunt. Back in her sparse Williamsburg apartment, Nora sat on the hardwood floor, surrounded by case files from her JAG work, cases she'd fought to protect others' honor. Now, she was the one under attack. Her mind raced to the second envelope her grandfather, Admiral Cornelius Caldwell, had left her, tucked inside her uniform jacket. Don't open this unless they try to burn it all down, he'd said, his voice a distant echo from his Brooklyn porch. She tore it open, her fingers steady despite the storm inside. Inside was a stack of legal documents, stock certificates, Triton board minutes, and a black USB drive. Heart pounding, she plugged it into her laptop. Her grandfather's face filled the screen, weathered but fierce, his Coast Guard blues faded but proud. Nora, he said, his voice a steady anchor, if you're watching this, Victor's gone further than I feared. He'll try to take your existence. Trust what I've left you. Fight like a Caldwell. The screen went black, but his words lit a fire. Victor thought he'd buried her, but he'd only dug his own grave. Nora's apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of her erased identity. She remembered a night after her first deployment, returning to the Grayson penthouse, expecting a warm welcome. Instead, she found her childhood bedroom gutted, her Coast Guard mementos, her journals, gone. Lila had stood in the doorway, sipping wine, her voice dripping with condescension. It's a guest suite now, Nora. More practical. That erasure was a rehearsal for this, a calculated purge of her place in the family. Now, Victor had escalated, weaponizing the system itself. Nora's fingers brushed the brass compass her grandfather gave her, its needle unwavering. She wasn't just fighting for money or shares. She was fighting for her name, her truth. Victor and Lila thought they'd won, but they didn't know Nora had allies waiting in the shadows, warriors who'd fought battles like hers. She picked up her phone, scrolling to Marla Finch's number, a retired JAG officer who'd faced down admirals. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The city's pulse thrummed outside Nora Caldwell's Williamsburg apartment, but inside, the silence was deafening, a quiet that carried the weight of her erased identity. Captain Eleanor, Nora Caldwell, a Coast Guard officer who'd faced storms at sea, now faced a tempest on land. Her father, Victor Grayson, and sister, Lila, had declared her legally dead, freezing her accounts and stealing her claim to Triton Defense. The sting of Victor's betrayal, burning her $40 million inheritance check, still lingered, but it was her grandfather's voice that steadied her. Admiral Cornelius, Corey Caldwell's final gift, a black USB drive, had revealed his warning: Victor will try to take your existence. Fight like a Caldwell. His words were a lifeline, pulling her from the edge of despair. Nora's fingers closed around the brass Coast Guard compass he'd given her years ago, its needle pointing true north, unwavering, just like his faith in her. That compass, cool and solid in her palm, wasn't just a relic, it was a beacon, guiding her through the fog of betrayal. She could almost hear him on his Brooklyn porch, bourbon in hand, saying, "They measure worth in dollars, Nora. We measure it in honor. Don't ever confuse the two." Nora's mind drifted to a memory that felt like yesterday, though it was years ago. After a brutal 18-month deployment in the Gulf of Mexico, she'd returned to the Graysons' Upper East Side penthouse, bone-tired but eager for home. She'd opened her bedroom door to find it stripped bare, her Coast Guard medals, her dog-eared maritime law books, even the framed photo of her and Corey on his cutter, gone. In their place, a sterile guest suite with a fake orchid on a glass table. Lila had glided by, wineglass in hand, her voice a blade. "It's more useful now, Nora. You're never here." The memory wasn't just pain, it was a map of their tactics, a pattern of erasure that culminated in this legal death. But Corey had seen it coming. That night on his porch, under Brooklyn's starry sky, he'd quoted Admiral McRaven, "If you want to change the world, never ring the bell." Victor and Lila were ringing it now, trying to make her quit. Nora's grip on the compass tightened. She wouldn't. The USB drive wasn't just a message, it held documents, a legal arsenal Corey had left her, stock certificates, board minutes, and a handwritten note in his steady scrawl: "Trust Marla Finch. She'll know the way." Marla, a retired JAG captain, was Corey's old friend, a legend who'd faced down corruption in the ranks. Nora drove through Brooklyn's rain-slicked streets to Marla's office in a converted warehouse at Dumbo, its brick walls steeped in the grit of old New York. The air inside smelled of strong coffee and justice, shelves groaning under legal binders. Marla, her steel-gray hair cropped short, looked up from her desk, her blue eyes sharp as a hawk's. No pleasantries, just a nod and a gruff, "You look like you've been through a hurricane, Captain." Nora set the compass on the desk, its needle steady, and spilled the truth: the burned check, the fake death certificate, Victor's war to bury her. Marla's jaw tightened, her silence a vow. "That bastard," she growled, her voice raw with loyalty to Corey's memory. "We'll fight this. You're not alone." Marla's office became Nora's anchor, a place where honor wasn't a buzzword but a code. As they pored over Corey's documents, Nora felt her grandfather's presence in every line, every signature. The compass sat on the table, a silent reminder of his lessons: navigate by truth, not fear. She recalled a Christmas party at the Grayson penthouse, where Victor had toasted Lila's $60 million Triton contract, his pride gleaming, only to dismiss Nora's service with a patronizing, "A stable career, I suppose." The room's polite chuckles had burned, but Corey's later words on his porch had healed: "They're trying to break you, Nora. Don't let them." Now, with her identity stolen and her legacy in ashes, those words were her battle cry. Marla slammed a binder shut, her eyes blazing. "Victor thinks he's untouchable. Let's show him he's not." Nora nodded, the compass's needle pointing to her next move, a fight not just for her inheritance, but for every sailor who'd been dismissed by men like Victor. The war was personal now, and Marla's office was her command post, where allies were gathering, ready to strike. The rain-slicked streets of Dumbo reflected Brooklyn's neon glow as Captain Eleanor, Nora Caldwell pushed through the door of Marla Finch's law office, a converted warehouse that hummed with the ghosts of old battles. The air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and determination, the brick walls lined with legal binders that told stories of justice won against impossible odds. Nora's grandfather, Admiral Cornelius Corey Caldwell, had left her a compass and a mission: fight Victor Grayson's betrayal, a man who'd burned her $40 million inheritance and declared her legally dead to steal her stake in Triton Defense. Marla, a retired JAG captain with steel-gray hair and eyes that could cut through lies, had become Nora's anchor. Now, they needed a weapon to strike back. Marla's office, cluttered with case files and dog-eared law books, was no longer just a refuge, it was a war room, and Nora was ready to assemble her crew. The brass compass sat on the table, its needle steady, pointing true north, a silent reminder of Corey's faith: fight like a Caldwell. But Victor's empire was vast, and Nora knew they needed more than grit, they needed proof. Marla made one call, her voice sharp as she summoned Quentin Morse, a former naval intelligence officer who arrived with the quiet intensity of a man who'd seen secrets unravel empires. Quentin, in his late 30s, looked like a librarian in his tweed jacket, but his pelican case, packed with forensic equipment, told a different story. He offered a firm handshake, his eyes scanning Nora like a radar. "Captain." No small talk, just focus. Nora spread Corey's documents across the table: stock certificates, board minutes, and a forged transfer agreement bearing her name. Quentin's scanner hummed to life, its green light slicing through the dim room as he analyzed the signatures. Nora and Marla sipped coffee so strong it could wake the dead, their silence heavy with purpose. Quentin's keyboard clicked rhythmically, each tap a step closer to exposing Victor's fraud. Nora's mind flickered to a memory of her first case as a JAG officer, defending a sailor against false charges. She'd won by finding one overlooked detail. Now, that same instinct drove her. This wasn't just about her, it was about every warrior dismissed by men like Victor. After hours of relentless work, Quentin leaned back, his face unreadable. "Got it," he said, his voice flat, like a sniper confirming a target. He turned his laptop toward them, displaying two signatures side by side. "This is yours, Captain," he said, pointing to the left, "from your service records. Notice the sharp angle in the C of Caldwell, the slight curve in the N. Consistent across dozens of documents." Then he gestured to the forged transfer. "This? It's a hack job. The C is too rounded, the stroke too heavy. Pixel analysis shows digital tampering, someone lifted it from a public record, probably your DD-214. He zoomed in, revealing jagged edges around the signature. "It's amateurish. I can swear to this in court." Marla's eyes gleamed, a predator sensing blood. "That's our silver bullet," she said, slamming her mug down. Nora felt a surge of hope, the first in weeks. This wasn't just evidence, it was a grenade to lob at Victor's empire. The room buzzed with quiet triumph, but Nora knew the fight was far from over. Victor's power wasn't just in Triton's boardroom, it was in his ability to twist truth, to paint her as a traitor to the Grayson name. She remembered a company gala where Victor had toasted Lila's deals while calling Nora's service quaint. The crowd's laughter had stung, but Corey's words later that night had steadied her. "Honor isn't a transaction, Nora. It's your compass." Now, that compass guided her next move. Marla leaned forward, her voice low. "This gets us to court, but Victor's got an army of lawyers and a PR machine. We need to hit him where it hurts, publicly." Nora nodded, her mind already racing to a name: Silas Tate, a journalist who toppled giants with nothing but truth and ink. Quentin packed his gear, his calm assurance a silent promise: they'd fight together. As Nora left the office, the compass in her pocket felt heavier, its needle pointing not just to victory, but to a reckoning that would shake Victor's world to its core. The Brooklyn warehouse that housed Marla Finch's law office glowed faintly under the sodium streetlights, its brick walls a fortress for Captain Nora Caldwell's fight. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the electric hum of strategy. Nora, her grandfather's brass compass a steady weight in her pocket, stood with Marla and Quentin Morse, their war room alive with the evidence of Victor Grayson's betrayal. Her father had burned her $40 million inheritance and declared her legally dead to seize Triton Defense, but Quentin's forensic analysis, a forged signature on stock transfers, had given them a weapon. Yet Nora knew Victor's true power lay not in boardrooms but in the court of public opinion, where he spun lies with the ease of a seasoned predator. Marla's words echoed, "We need to hit him publicly." Nora's mind locked onto Silas Tate, a grizzled investigative journalist whose pen had felled corrupt titans. If anyone could expose Victor's fraud to the world, it was him. The compass's needle, pointing true north, urged her forward. This wasn't just about reclaiming her legacy, it was about tearing down the lies that dismissed every warrior like her. Nora met Silas in a dive bar near the Brooklyn waterfront, a place reeking of stale beer and whispered secrets. His face, etched with the lines of 1,000 stories, sized her up as she slid into the booth. No pleasantries, just a gruff, "Captain Caldwell." She handed him a flash drive, Quentin's affidavit, the forged documents, and a coerced doctor's statement about her fake death certificate. Silas's eyes narrowed as he skimmed the files, his fingers tapping the table like a war drum. "They declared you dead?" he asked, a spark of grim fascination in his voice. "Legally," Nora confirmed, her tone steady as steel. He leaned back, a slow nod signaling he was in. "Give me 48 hours, he said, pocketing the drive. Nora left the bar, the city's pulse syncing with her own. She remembered a Triton gala where Victor had painted her service as a quaint hobby, his guests chuckling. Corey's voice cut through the memory, "They're ringing the bell, Nora. Don't quit." Silas was her counterstrike, and the world was about to hear it. At 6 a.m. Monday, Silas's story hit like a torpedo. Published on ProPublica, the headline screamed, "Erased in Greed, a Coast Guard captain's fight against Triton Defense's fraud." The article was surgical, laying bare Victor's burned check, the fake death certificate, and the forged signatures, backed by Quentin's analysis and whistleblower accounts from ex-Triton employees who'd seen Victor's rage against Nora's pointless career. Social media erupted, #Justice for Caldwell trending as veterans groups rallied, their outrage a wildfire. Triton stock plummeted at the NYSE's opening bell, investors fleeing as Victor's empire cracked. Nora watched the news from her apartment, the TV flickering with clips of protesters outside Triton's Manhattan headquarters, chanting her name. Her phone buzzed with messages from strangers, veterans, sailors, everyday people who'd felt erased by power. One read, "You're fighting for us all, Captain." Her heart swelled, but the victory was bittersweet. She thought of Corey, his bourbon glass glinting on his porch, saying, "Honor is your shield." This was her shield now, forged in public truth. The story didn't just shake Victor, it panicked him. Nora knew desperate men made mistakes, and she could almost see him scrambling, his PR machine faltering. Marla called, her voice electric. Silas lit the fuse, "Nora. Now we take this to court." Nora's fingers brushed the compass, its needle unwavering. The public strike had shifted the battlefield, but the war wasn't won. Victor's lawyers would fight dirty, painting her as unstable, just as he'd hinted on TV. She recalled a night when Corey quoted Ruth Bader Ginsburg, "Fight for what you care about, but do it in a way others will join you." The world was joining her now, but the courtroom loomed, a place where truth would face Victor's last stand. Nora stood, her Coast Guard whites pressed for battle, ready to march into the San Diego Superior Courthouse with Marla and Quentin at her side. The public had spoken, but the law would deliver the final blow, and Nora was ready to wield it. The San Diego Superior Courthouse stood like a sentinel against the California sunrise, its marble halls echoing with the weight of justice. Captain Eleanor, Nora, Caldwell strode through its doors, her Coast Guard whites gleaming, no longer a symbol of defiance but a banner of truth. The world outside buzzed with the fallout of Silas Tate's ProPublica expose, which had ripped through Victor Grayson's empire, exposing his burned $40 million check, forged stock transfers, and the chilling declaration of Nora's legal death. #Justice for Caldwell trended as Triton Defense's stock cratered, but Nora knew Victor's real power lay in the legal arena, where his army of lawyers could bury truth under motions and lies. Inside Marla Finch's Brooklyn war room, Nora, Marla, and forensic analyst Quinton Morse had armed themselves with evidence: Quinton's affidavit proving the forgery, a coerced doctor's deposition, and a video from Admiral Cornelius Corey Caldwell, Nora's grandfather. The compass in her pocket, its needle steady, reminded her of Corey's words, "Fight like a Caldwell." Today, in this courtroom, that fight would reach its climax, and Nora was ready to face Victor's empire head-on. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension as Victor and Lila sat with their legal team, their faces pale but defiant. Victor's knuckles whitened on the table's edge, his usual swagger replaced by a brittle fury. Lila avoided Nora's gaze, her designer suit looking like a costume too big for her shrinking confidence. Marla stood, her presence commanding, as she faced Judge Evelyn Torres, a no-nonsense jurist whose gaze could pierce steel. Victor's lawyer, a slick attorney named Roland Hayes, opened with a volley, dismissing Silas's article as tabloid gossip and Nora's claims as a family spat gone public. His voice dripped with condescension, painting Nora as an unstable veteran grasping for power. Nora's blood simmered, but her training held, eyes forward, face a mask of calm. She remembered Corey on his porch, bourbon in hand, saying, "They'll try to break you, Nora. Don't let them." Marla countered, her voice ablade, "This isn't a spat, Your Honor. This is felony fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to seize a multi-billion-dollar company." Marla laid out the evidence with surgical precision, placing Quinton's affidavit on the bench, its pixel analysis exposing the forged signature on Triton's stock transfers. She followed with the doctor's deposition, revealing how Victor's team had pressured him to falsify Nora's death certificate. The courtroom stirred, whispers rippling through the gallery. But Marla saved her deadliest weapon for last. "Your Honor, we have a final piece of testimony," she said, her voice ringing with authority. A video statement from Admiral Cornelius Caldwell, recorded 1 month before his death. The lights dimmed, and Corey's face filled the screen, frail but resolute, his Coast Guard blues a mirror of Nora's own. "If you're watching this," he said, his voice steady as a ship's keel, "Victor Grayson has dishonored my wishes and my granddaughter. I built Triton on integrity, and I entrust it to Nora, my fellow guardian of honor. Any action against her is a fraud." The room froze, every eye on Victor, whose face drained of color, a king unraveling before his court. Judge Torres's gaze was granite as she turned to Victor. "Mr. Grayson," she said, her voice sharp as a gavel's crack, "this court finds credible evidence of fraud, forgery, and perjury." The gavel fell, a thunderclap that echoed through the room. "All asset transfers under fraudulent authority are null and void. The estate of Admiral Caldwell is to be executed as written, with Captain Nora Caldwell as sole heir and controlling party of Triton Defense. This matter is referred to the District Attorney for criminal investigation." Victor slumped, defeated. Lila shrank, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. Nora stood tall, the compass in her pocket a silent victory. She recalled a night when Corey quoted Ruth Bader Ginsburg, "Fight in a way others will join you." The courtroom, packed with reporters and veterans, was proof her fight had rallied a legion. As she stepped into the sunlight, Marla at her side, Nora knew the war was won, but a quieter battle awaited, the reckoning with her sister, and the choice of what to build from the ashes. The San Diego courthouse victory still echoed in Captain Eleanor, Nora, Caldwell's ears, the gavel's crack a final blow against her father Victor Grayson's empire of lies. Triton Defense's fraudulent transfers were voided, and Nora stood as the rightful heir to her grandfather's legacy, armed with his brass compass and the truth of his video testament. But the war's end left a hollow ache, a quiet battlefield where personal wounds lingered. A week later, a text from her sister Lila flickered on Nora's phone, "Please, let's talk." 3 words, fragile as glass, but heavy with the weight of betrayal. Nora remembered Marla Finch's advice in her cluttered Brooklyn office, the air thick with coffee and resolve. "You won the war, Nora. Now you decide who lives in your peace." Lila had stood silent as Victor burned Nora's $40 million inheritance, had signed the forged documents that declared her legally dead. Yet Nora agreed to meet, not out of hope, but to close a door. The neutral ground was a small cafe in San Diego's Gaslamp Quarter, its warm lights a stark contrast to the Cold War she'd fought. The compass in her pocket, pointing true north, steadied her for what was coming. Nora arrived to find Lila at a corner table, the morning light catching the dark circles under her eyes. Her Chanel suit hung loose, her usual poise replaced by a brittle fragility. Lila's hands trembled as she reached for Nora's, her voice a whisper, "I'm so sorry, Nora." The words felt like a plea, but they landed hollow. Nora let her hand rest in her lap, an invisible wall between them. Lila stammered, "Dad said it was just paperwork, a way to protect Triton during a restructure. I didn't know it would go this far." Her excuses were flimsy, a child's lie unraveling under scrutiny. Nora's mind flashed to the law office, Lila's smirk as Victor torched the check, her silence as he painted Nora as unstable on TV. Those weren't mistakes, they were choices. Nora's Coast Guard training kept her voice calm, her face a mask of discipline, but inside, a storm churned. She remembered a Christmas at the Grayson penthouse, Victor toasting Lila's deals while dismissing Nora's service with a patronizing smile. Lila had laughed then, complicit in the family's disdain. Now, she wanted absolution. "You signed my name, Lila," Nora said, her voice low, cutting like a blade through the cafe's hum. "You watched Dad burn my inheritance. You stood by while he told the world I was broken. That's not knowing. That's choosing." Lila's tears spilled, carving tracks through her makeup, but Nora felt no urge to comfort her. She saw Corey's face, his eyes steady on his Brooklyn porch. "They'll try to break you, Nora. Don't let them." Lila choked out, "We're family. I'm your sister." The word, family, felt like a weapon, one Nora had once longed to believe in. She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Family doesn't erase you for money, Lila. You chose ambition over me, power over truth. I respect that you made your choice. Now live with it." She placed a $20 bill on the table, the gesture final, like signing a discharge order. Lila's face crumpled, a sob escaping, but Nora stood, the compass's weight grounding her. As she walked away, the cafe's warmth faded into the gas lamp's morning buzz. The pain was sharp, surgical, a necessary amputation to save her soul. Nora recalled Corey quoting the Bible, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Her mercy was sparing Lila criminal charges, not for Lila's sake, but for Nora's own peace. She wouldn't become Victor, consumed by vengeance. The memory of her gutted childhood bedroom, her medals, her life, erased, flashed, but it no longer cut. Lila's sob echoed behind her, a bridge collapsing, but Nora kept walking, stepping into the light of her own making. The war had forged her, and now, with Triton in her hands, she could build something new, a legacy not of wealth, but of honor. Marla's words rang, "Decide who lives in your peace." Lila wasn't invited. Nora's next steps would be for those who'd fought battles like hers, warriors erased by systems and families. The compass pointed to a future she'd shape, one life at a time. The gas lamp quarter's morning light faded as Captain Eleanor, Nora, Caldwell walked away from her sister Lila, the echo of a severed bond lingering like a distant storm. The San Diego courthouse victory had restored her grandfather's legacy, control of Triton defense and the truth of her existence, but it was the quiet aftermath that shaped Nora's next mission. Her grandfather, Admiral Cornelius Corey Caldwell, had left her more than wealth. His brass compass, its needle steady on true north, was a call to build, not destroy. Nora rejected Victor Grayson's leather CEO throne, its taint of greed a world she'd long outgrown. Instead, she turned her gaze to a crumbling naval barracks in San Diego's Liberty Station, a place where the salty breeze carried echoes of service. With Marla Finch's words in her mind, "You decide who lives in your peace," Nora envisioned a sanctuary, a legacy that honored Corey's belief in integrity over dollars. The compass in her pocket was her guide, but the fire in her heart was her own, burning to give others the strength she'd fought so hard to claim. Nora wielded her controlling shares in Triton defense with surgical precision, not to rule, but to reform. She ousted Victor's loyalists, installing a board of retired Coast Guard officers and ethical leaders who valued principle over profit. Then, she funneled a chunk of Triton's profits into the Caldwell Foundation, headquartered in the restored Liberty Station barracks. The building, with its weathered brick and Spanish colonial arches, became a haven for female veterans, women who, like Nora, had served only to face battles at home. The foundation offered free legal counsel from Marla's firm, career workshops, housing aid, and mental health support. It wasn't just a non-profit, it was a fortress for warriors, a place where Nora's scars could help others heal. She remembered Corey's porch, his bourbon glass glinting as he quoted the Bible, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Her mercy was this, building a home for those the world had tried to erase, just as Victor and Lila had tried to erase her. One spring afternoon, a young woman named Corporal Tessa Reed stepped into the Foundation's office, her shoulders slumped under the weight of a dishonorable discharge. Tessa, a former Marine, had reported a superior's harassment, only to be branded a troublemaker and cast out. Her story spilled in a quiet, broken voice, her eyes dull with defeat, a mirror of Nora's own pain after Victor's public lies. Nora listened, not as a benefactor, but as a sister in arms. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her voice firm yet warm. "We'll fight with you." Marla took Tessa's case pro bono, and Quentin Morse offered his forensic skills to dig into digital evidence. Watching Tessa leave, her posture a fraction straighter, Nora felt Corey's presence. This was his true legacy, not $40 million, but one life reclaimed, one spark of hope rekindled. The memory of Victor burning her check, of Lila's smirk, faded against this moment's quiet power. Months later, on Corey's birthday, Nora drove her battered Jeep to Point Loma, where the Pacific stretched endless and free. The Grayson mansion loomed nearby, a hollow monument to a life she'd left behind. She didn't glance at it. Instead, she pulled the compass from her pocket, its brass warm from her touch. The ocean breeze whipped her hair as the sun dipped, painting the sky in fiery gold. Nora's scars, Victor's betrayal, Lila's complicity, were etched deep, but they no longer ached. They were a map of her strength, forged in fire, guided by Corey's love. The foundation was her true north, a legacy of honor that would outlast Triton's wealth. She was no longer the Grayson outcast, she was Nora Caldwell, a warrior who'd built a home for others from her own ashes. This story isn't just Nora's, it's for anyone who's faced betrayal, who's had their truth twisted by those meant to protect them. If Nora's fight stirs something in you, drop "resilient" in the comments, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe to follow more stories of unbreakable spirits. Your battles matter, and together, we can build legacies that endure. The sun sank below the Pacific, casting a warm glow over Point Loma as Nora Caldwell stood alone, her grandfather's compass in hand. The ocean's rhythm matched her steady breaths, a peace she'd fought tooth and nail to claim. Victor and Lila's betrayal, burning her inheritance, erasing her identity, had once threatened to break her, but Nora had risen, not as their pawn, but as a builder of something greater. The Caldwell Foundation, alive with the voices of veterans finding their footing, was her answer to their greed. Each woman who walked through its doors carried a piece of Corey's legacy, his belief that honor was a currency no one could burn. Nora's Jeep, parked nearby, was a relic of her grind, ramen dinners, late-night case reviews, and a life carved by her own hands. The scars remained, but they were proof of her survival, her refusal to ring the bell. Corey's voice echoed, "Fight like a Caldwell." She had, and she'd won, not just for herself, but for every warrior who'd been dismissed or erased. Nora's story is a beacon for anyone standing in their own ashes, searching for true north. If her journey resonates, if you've ever fought to reclaim your name, join this fight. Drop "honor" in the comments, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, because your battles are part of a legacy we're building together. Let's keep fighting for truth, for honor, for each other.